Richard Nixon.
Well, I'm not a crook.
Ronald Reagan.
Tear down this wall.
George W. Bush.
I can hear you. The rest of the world hears you.
And Donald Trump.
And a friend of mine for a long time, he only likes politics. If you ask him about how are the Yankees doing, he has no interest. If you ask him almost anything, he likes politics, and he's a professional at the highest level. Roger Stone.
All of these presidents relied on one man to secure their seat in the Oval Office. That man is Roger Stone. This is the Roger Stone Show on 77 WABC.
This is the Roger Stone Show on WABC Radio. WABC, making AM radio great again. Joining me now is one of the rising stars of the Republican Party, Congressman Byron Donalds, who represents southwestern Florida, has really emerged as a major defender of President Donald Trump in this outrageous witch hunt. I guess this is witch hunt number 4, maybe it's 5. It's hard to keep track. And you've seen him on Fox. You've seen him on CNN. He's not ever afraid to go into the lion's den. Congressman Donalds, welcome to the Roger Stone Show.
Roger, how are you, man? It's good to be on your show.
These are dark days for America. As a 45-year veteran of American politics, it's very hard to see what's unfolding right before us. We've now come to a point in America where expressing your concerns or challenging the results, the anomalies, the irregularities in an election is deemed a crime, and trying to collect documented evidence of voter irregularities and fraud, that's part of a conspiracy. How did we get to this place?
I think we got here because, the radical left really thought, and this even goes back to the Obama years, they really thought that they were on this path to fundamentally transform this country. I think people forget that that's what, Barack Obama said a couple of years before he won the presidency back in 2008. And ever since then, they've been on this path of radical transformation. And for these people, nothing will stand in their way. When Donald Trump came in, that was a shock to them. Like they're still in disbelief that he ever took the oath of office to be president of this country. And what it really meant for them was that it was a roadblock to the agenda that they've been fighting for. Like I tell people all the time that this version of the Democrat Party, or the radical left within the Democrat Party, they only care about the agenda, and they will use anybody, they will destroy anybody, they will defame anybody that stands in the way of that agenda. And when you look at it in that vein, then you can see how we've gotten to a place where, President Trump has now been indicted for a 4th time. Parents became domestic terrorists for caring about their kids' education. Members of our military were discharged for refusing to take a COVID vaccine. And so many other things. And the federal agencies have been spying on the American people and or suppressing the speech of the American people. It's all about the agenda. And it's always about the agenda for the radical left. And so what it requires is for, Americans, people who don't have to always agree, but understand that America is a place where freedom and liberty is the number one ethos of our country above any political agenda. We all have to stand up to that. And that's what I'm going to do. And I'm glad that President Trump is doing it. And Roger, I know you've been doing that all your political life.
Many people feel that the House Republicans have been slow on key issues before the Congress, such as the potential impeachment of Joe Biden, if not Attorney General Merrick Garland, the border crisis, the weaponized DOJ and FBI. There's certainly members there who've done yeoman service. I think, to be fair, I'm not sure everybody understands the extent to which they are hamstrung by agencies of government that simply refuse to turn over information that the Congress is legally entitled to. But do you think that we are moving towards an impeachment of Joe Biden based on what you've seen so far?
I do. I really do. And look, when we took over the majority, the first thing we wanted to do was actually get back to some semblance of order and process. Like, a legislative body is messy. It's messy. It takes a lot of work. And what we saw when Nancy Pelosi was Speaker of the House is no member of Congress had a say. Even the Democrat members, they didn't have a say. It was Nancy Pelosi's way, first, second, third, fourth, and fifth. And that might make, the political left feel good, but it's terrible for a democratic republic like ours. So when you restore regular order, what it means is it takes time to build cases. You have to go through investigations. And so what we've done with respect to Joe Biden is we have gone through a systematic investigative process. The things that we've uncovered the last 6 months, the Department of Justice, mostly because they've been obstructing justice, they couldn't uncover that in 6 years. We've done it in 6 months. I think when we get back to Washington, I think an impeachment inquiry in the Judiciary Committee will begin. And it will give some of the members of our party who are concerned about impeachment simply because, they don't want to be seen as doing tit for tat. When we demonstrate all the information in totality, even they will see that Congress has a responsibility to hold the inquiry and then potentially lead to articles of impeachment of Joe Biden. But look, Roger, I'll tell you, I started in politics as an activist. I was in the Tea Party movement a decade ago. So I understand people saying that you guys aren't doing enough, not moving fast enough. But we also have to, we have to restore the validity of our institutions. I do firmly believe that. The Democrats pay lip service to that because it sounds good in talking points, but they're the ones that are actually destroying the validity of our institutions right now. We have a responsibility to restore that because it's crucial for the continuance of America. It really is. And so I think we have a responsibility to do it the right way. I think to the stuff about the border, one of the reasons why we are hamstrung is because Senate Republicans led by Mitch McConnell, they teamed up with Nancy Pelosi and Joe Biden to pass that omnibus deal right before Christmas. We took over the majority after the election, but they voted for this omnibus package. And when they did that, it locked in all federal spending until September 30. We're coming up to that point right now. So what House Republicans, specifically Freedom Caucus members and other members, RSC members and some other members of our conference, we're pushing back hard saying we are not interested in funding a government that doesn't secure our southern border. That makes no sense at all. And so I think what people are about to see is a serious battle over federal spending, and border security is going to be at the heart of it.
I do think that the Democrats rushed to judgment at a minimum. They really never had legitimate grounds, and they tried to impeach President Donald Trump first over the Russian collusion hoax, which we now know, based on John Durham's report, was a complete fraud. There was no probable cause. There was no evidence whatsoever of Russian collusion with the Trump campaign, yet they based their illegal FISA warrants to spy on Trump and his campaign on it. They opened the FBI's counterintelligence investigation Crossfire Hurricane based on it. They appointed Robert Mueller as special counsel, who tried to destroy my life over fabricated process crimes over it. So I agree that to bring the entire caucus along, because I think people don't really appreciate that Kevin McCarthy does not control every single vote in the caucus. He has to get consensus, and ultimately he has to get a complete consensus in his caucus because the margin in the House is very thin. So we have to have the goods. I agree with that. And I think Congressman Comer, who's appeared here on WABC radio, did a great interview with John Katsimatidis. I think he's done an extraordinary job, but it has to be frustrating when you don't get the cooperation of the executive branch of the government, and they won't turn over bank records and other records that the Congress is legally entitled to. It's so funny that the left jumps up and down and screams about the rule of law, except for when they violate the rule of law.
Listen, you're 100% right. this administration is the worst at this, and I've talked to some of the members who were around when the Obama administration was there, and they said the Obama administration was really bad, but they've never seen anything like this. Joe Biden just doesn't – it's not that Joe Biden doesn't respond to the press. His administration doesn't respond to anybody. And so you have an executive branch that is literally acting as if they are a monarchy, which is a complete violation of separation of powers. People think of the student loan bailout that got thrown out by the Supreme Court, thankfully, but the student loan bailout is just the one big thing you see. People don't remember that when the Democrats were in charge and they controlled all three branches of government, one of their budget reconciliation bills they tried to put through, they were going to allow the Treasury Department to spy on the bank accounts of every American. They were going to allow that by law. And the only reason why it didn't go through is because you had Democrat voters in Democrat districts saying, that's insane, get your hands out of my pocket. And that's the only reason why today the Treasury Department isn't involved looking at the banking transactions of every American. That's how diabolical these people are. Roger, they don't care about the law. They care about their agenda. And if it means that they will ignore the Constitution or ignore the law or they won't comply with Congress, then that's what they will do to accomplish this. And so I think the number one issue that has to get cleaned up in our country, in my view, number one, yes, the southern border has to be secured. But number two, the federal agencies have to get cleaned out because it's a serious problem for our country.
Your colleague, Congressman Matt Gaetz, has suggested defunding the Department of Justice, defunding the FBI. It is true that Republicans don't control any branch of government. They only have control of the lower house of Congress, and therefore it's important that that power be wielded in an aggressive manner in order to ensure that we restore integrity into these agencies. I mean, when I grew up, J. Edgar Hoover's book, Masters of Deceit, about the communist conspiracy here and abroad, was given to every single elementary school child in the country. Today's FBI appears to me to be a rogue agency harassing pro-lifers, showing up at the home of pro-life activists with guns drawn, harassing, taking down the license plate numbers of parents who go to school board meetings to object to the curriculum being taught to their children. How do we get these rogue agencies to obey the law and get them back to their core mission?
Look, I agree with my colleague, the other gentleman from Florida. I think he's correct. We have to use the power of the purse. It's the only way until we win back the White House. It's the only way you bring these agencies to heel. Now, what do I mean by that? Listen, you have the ranking file in the FBI, who a lot of them are following orders. They are good men and women. They love this country. It's the political brass at the FBI. It's the political brass at the Department of Justice where the problems really are. So in my mind, there's a thing we call on Capitol Hill called the Holman Rule, where you can literally go after specific people and start stripping out their salaries. We should do that. If you're talking about the appointees levels in these agencies, we should sufficiently curtail their spending and what they're allowed to spend money on. We should do that. We should put specific rules into how the government is funded with respect to these agencies about the things that they are not allowed to do. We should do all those things out of the House. Now, the Senate under Chuck Schumer will say that's unreasonable, and they'll just say no altogether. And my view is very clear on this. If the Senate led by Chuck Schumer and the executive led by Joe Biden say that there can't be restrictions on these agencies, that doesn't stop the agencies from doing their core mission and their core functions, then why would we fund them anyway? We'll be funding our own demise, and that is insanity.
What is your view on our current support for Ukraine, which is now into, last time I looked, about $131 billion?
Well, look, I voted against the last two supplementals, and the way this thing is starting to look like it's coming out of the White House, I'm going to vote against the third supplemental. There's no accountability. There's no inspector general on any of this money. It's literally a blank check. And so do I want Putin to take over Ukraine? No, I absolutely do not. Do I think that the United States has a responsibility to help Ukraine? I do, and that's because we signed an agreement, frankly, with Russia at the time and with England that we would all protect Ukrainian sovereignty. So I think if the United States says it's going to do something, it should do it. But there's two major issues around Ukraine. One is the fact that Joe Biden is frankly, just a loser. He's not a leader. He's the one that's gotten us into this Ukrainian conflict. And so we're expecting him to lead us out of it. Like, that's never occurred. So that's a major problem with number one. Number two, our southern border is a mess, but we're protecting the Ukrainian border. And I think there's a lot of people in our country who are saying, why are we sending money to Ukraine when we can't secure our own border? And you just had wildfires in Maui and those people got $700. That just makes no sense. With Ukraine specifically, we're in a tough spot because if Russia takes over, Russia will now control 80% of grain in the world. Russia will control that if they take over Ukraine. That's a serious problem for us and for so many other countries. So we're in a rock and a hard place. What I want to see is serious accountability for the money that has been spent and what is going to be spent. And the other thing we got to have is you got to secure our southern border. And my message to Joe Biden is, you want to protect Ukraine's border, protect ours first, and we'll help you protect Ukraine's.
Do you think House Republicans should move articles of impeachment against Secretary Mayorkas?
I do. We should be doing that with Mayorkas because he's lied to Congress. And I'll add one more to it. I think we should begin proceedings on Merrick Garland. I think with Mayorkas, he's lied to Congress repeatedly. They are doing things to not secure the border. The drug cartels are abusing Joe Biden's policy, making billions of dollars to do it. Fentanyl is raging through our country, and young girls are being sold into sex slavery. And every time I make that last comment, I'm waiting for Democrats who always tell us about how much they care about women to say why they don't care about young girls being sold into sex slavery. They have no comment because, like I said at the beginning, Roger, they only care about the agenda. They don't care about black people. They don't care about women. They care about the agenda. Now, when I bring up Merrick Garland, it's because I wholeheartedly believe that Merrick Garland is part of the obstruction of justice by the Department of Justice into not only what's going on with the Biden family, but I also believe he is the core of weaponizing justice against President Trump and other people in this country. Both those things are wrong. Period.
You're absolutely right. And just to be very clear, these state actions in Georgia, in New York State, these are being done in total coordination with the Justice Department. Former Speaker Newt Gingrich reported that they actually sped up the indictment of President Trump in Fulton County because more and more bad news coming out about the Bidens. It just seems to me we are in an information war. They play a game of distraction under the leadership of Congressman Comer and Jim Jordan. We've seen evidence of extortion, bribery, racketeering, money laundering, influence peddling, illegal lobbying, and we now know definitively that Hunter Biden and Joe Biden and Jim Biden and other members of the Biden family got multi-million-dollar wires from Ukraine, from Russia, from China, from Romania. I remember that flashpoint in the debate. Trump brought this up with Tucker Carlson, where Donald Trump asked candidate Biden if it was true that he and his son had received $1.3 million from the wife of the mayor of Moscow because she was seeking to evade being on the sanctions list. And Joe Biden called Donald Trump a liar. We now know Trump was wrong. It wasn't 1.3 million. It was 40 million. It was 40 million into Hunter Biden's real estate development company, given his vast experience in real estate development. So, I mean, it is amazing to me the way, if you chart it out on a piece of paper, every time there is breaking and serious evidence of crimes by the Bidens, there is some new move on President Donald Trump. Your reaction to the way the president handled his arraignment, his arrest, his fingerprinting, and being mugshotted in Atlanta this week?
Well, look, first of all, the fact that this even occurred is tragic and wrong, and people will say you're being partisan or just defending Trump, and I'm not saying that. What I think is that you have a serious problem of weaponization by the justice system in the country. It's just flat out wrong. It shouldn't occur, and it's being wielded politically, which has never been what we've been about in this country until right now. Secondarily, I think the way he handled himself was the exact way to do it. I think he demonstrated the right amount of defiance with this whole thing. Also understanding how big this moment is for the country. I think the president's words talking about weaponization and election interference are absolutely correct. And I think he's also been correct in saying that this is not what the American people want to see. Listen, in our country, you can have your personal feelings about Donald Trump. You can love him, you can hate him. And that's all well and we all sign up for that when you get into the political world. But to have agents of our government turn the power of government against political rivals is un-American in my view. Now, if you have the goods, like if you really have documented evidence that is beyond the shadow of reasonable doubt, that's something. But what they're doing here is just waging a political war simply because Joe Biden sucks at his job, is a terrible president, and is a corrupt president. And we can clearly prove that. You stated it just now, Roger, and we have more details that are going to come.
Byron Donalds, a man I'd like to see run for governor of Florida, or perhaps U.S. Senator, maybe even President of the United States someday, because I think he's a man who has what it takes. Congressman, thank you so much for joining us on The Roger Stone Show.
Thank you, Roger.